what we want to do is bring on our next guest. Chris Bedford is from the Federalist. He also, Chris, you've got some new YouTube series out, a lot of video happening at the Federalist right now. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. I started a new YouTube series called The Culture War. We release an episode every week. The next one will be out later today. Tackling not only just some of the bigger issues that we're dealing with and some of the huge problems in our culture, but trying to come up with some solutions on how to handle it, not just complaining about everything that's going wrong around us.
Yeah, and that is something I notice with people is that, especially people who consume conservative talk radio, is they want tools on how to make things better and not just, wallowing in despair. Chris, I want to talk about your latest piece in the Federalist. It's titled, "The Media Didn't Get It Wrong on Lafayette Park. They Lied to America and They're Still Lying." Now, this is a theme we've seen over and over again. Kind of break down for people exactly why you're not buying this idea anymore that they're just getting it wrong every time.
They are all witnesses to what was happening here in Washington, D.C. over the last couple of years, over the Trump administration specifically, with the riots, and particularly over last summer with all of the race riots that we saw and the chaos. Now, we have offices downtown. I used to work at the Daily Caller downtown. I know those people. I know the bartenders. I was a bartender for 10 years. I know the people who work the doors. I know the guys who work at the hotels. And I know the folks who are down there all the time, whether they're working in the White House or working in the private sector. And when you walked down there in downtown Washington, you smelled obvious drug use. You saw people occasionally being threatened. You saw spray paint and broken windows and boarded up windows and entire autonomous zones where rioters had lit fire to churches, where they pulled down statues and all that was left was a spray painted pedestal covered in curse words. And these reporters who were telling us every day that these are peaceful protesters. This is just a peaceful protest. In order to get to the White House, to get onto the cameras, they had to walk through the same thing that I walked through, which just proved to me that, well, maybe people in New York or maybe people in San Francisco might not have known what was happening in Washington, D.C. These reporters were walking through those camps, looking at the elderly people who had to be escorted into the hotel because the peaceful protesters might kill them or rob them. They walked through it. So when they said, whoops, we got it wrong, look at this IG report, it turns out Donald Trump didn't actually gas these peaceful protesters. It was violent protesters, and that decision was made earlier to clear the park after they had already lit a church on fire, after they were trying to tear a statue down. When they said, whoops, our bad, how could we have known any better? I knew that they were explicitly lying because they saw the same pain that I did, and they had to walk by these beautiful buildings and these young and old men, a lot of immigrant men, black men who were sitting there every day trying to clean the garbage and the spray paint off of their buildings and their shops, and they ignored it.
Yeah, and they ignore so much. I mean, when it doesn't fit their narrative, they'll ignore Antifa. They'll ignore, the president's cognitive decline. They had no problem bringing on therapists and psychoanalyzing Donald Trump when they thought he couldn't drink water properly, but they don't want to go near the fact that Biden is clearly struggling on the world stage. And I wanted to bring up, you specifically talk about Lafayette Park, how it wasn't meant as a photo shoot. The IG report made that explicitly clear. And still, Jim Acosta and the like don't admit it. I mean, Joe Scarborough, they're in complete denial. But you brought up something I didn't notice. You specifically call out Politico Playbook because that day, that was the biggest story, was that their fake news had been debunked. The debunkers had been debunked. And you mentioned that what they decided to run with on Politico in their newsletter, the must-read of the day, was something totally different and something that actually had to do with Donald Trump.
Now, if you have the misfortune of having to read Politico Playbook every day, it is not good for the heart or the brain. It is somehow the most one of the most self-obsessed DC newsletters out there. But a lot of people do get their news from it, or at least used to. What they thought was the most important story that day, the day that it came out that we'd been lied to for a year, just like it came out the same thing about Officer Sicknick or it came out about Russian collusion, just constant lies. They thought that the most important aspect was that this profile on Bloomberg about the Trump coast and what the former president was doing in his retirement from politics and what he was doing in his private life. And it claimed that he lived in a feedback loop where he was just watching the news that agreed with him, that he was living in some kind of fantasy land, that his supporters were acting like the things that were going on around them weren't happening. Now, having had a lot of my friends who've been down there and dealing with the former president and down at Mar-a-Lago and contacts and sources, that doesn't seem to be the case at all to me. But what was particularly ironic about this whole thing was that right when it came out that the entire media had once again, or the corporate media, had been gaslighting and lying to the American people, their response was, look at Donald Trump. Look at what he does. He lies and he gaslights. He doesn't know what's going on. All you have to do is log on to that horrible service, Twitter, for just a few moments, and you can see how much these reporters go back and forth congratulating each other on how stupid all of them are.
Yeah, no, and when I go on Twitter, I really try to avoid, you mentioned how bad it is for the heart and the brain to read Politico, but what's, I would argue, even worse is the Twitter trending page where they explain to you why certain things are trending. And it could be the worst day for optics-wise for Kamala Harris, which she had over the past couple weeks. And I'll think to myself, well, you know, it's got to be trending. And instead, they'll trend something about Kayleigh McEnany saying that she never lied. They're still obsessed with making the story Donald Trump. Chris, I want to ask you what your takeaway was from the G7. Our poll question of the day is kind of like, what was the worst moment of it? There were so many to choose from. What was your take on the meetings of the minds?
You know, it was just such a disappointing day to be... After a couple of years, for the first time in a long time, of the United States being put first in these meetings and our leaders actually representing us, you sit there and you've actually got a meeting where all everyone wants to talk about is how diplomatic it was, how well everybody seems to get along. But that's not the goal of diplomacy. Diplomacy is just a tactic here. So if you're looking at what the Europeans were able to get out of this meeting with their president, they've got a pipeline of oil from Russia, bringing in energy from a country that is not necessarily always on our side. They got the United States pledging to give them more money for their climate programs. They have more soldiers from the United States coming over to protect them in Europe. And they get to trade more with Iran. They get to work with China. They basically get to do everything that they want to do. And the Biden administration is completely fine with that and thinks that that's somehow a win for America. All they had to do was say nice things and use words like normalcy. And I think it's because a lot of those people in the Biden administration don't really care about what you or I think. They really just care about what the United Nations thinks and what all these international organizations think. And that is who they're representing when they're there, not the American people.
No, and you bring up such a good point, Chris, because if you were in a regular company, you know, a company that actually had to see results and not government, and you met with your boss at the end of the month and they said, you know, show me your progress or, you know, give me some tangibles here that I can figure out how well you're doing. And you just said, well, I have nothing to show you, but I get along with my coworkers really well. And, you know, we have a great time. And, you know, sometimes we go out for drinks after work and we love each other. Your boss would be like, okay, well, what are you guys doing for me? I mean, what does that mean?
We're spending your money and we're spending all your expense accounts and I'm taking your competitors out on your dime. That's exactly what it'd be like telling your boss. And let's see how well that goes, because these folks aren't even interested in representing their company or their country. You walk to the average Department of State or talk to some of these diplomats, they really do think that the goal of United States diplomacy is helping the countries that they're in. They think that they're a charity. In reality, our help should be contingent on our interests, and a lot of people just don't believe that anymore.
All right, now I might be throwing something at you that you haven't seen, but I'm guessing you have, because I know you have ties to New England, Chris. Have you seen the story about the man who was swallowed by the whale?
Not only have I seen it, but I actually just picked up a copy of Moby Dick from the New Bedford Whaling Museum 2 weeks ago because it had nice pictures, and I thought maybe I'll be able to finally finish this book with these nice pictures. And to see the man getting picked up and to see the interviews with his sister, to read the interviews with his sister Cynthia, and just imagine her sitting there and telling this story. It is so wild and so New England. It
is so wild, and I'm waiting to see if there's a video or if there's anything where we can really pin this down, because now I'm watching some of the stuff on Fox and there's people saying it seems a little bit too crazy to be true. But I don't know. Good luck with Moby Dick, though, because my fiance just finished that book and he hated it. It was painful.
I've been loving it so far.
All right, good. All right, Chris Bedford from the Federalist, thank you so much. I'm going to tweet out your column to all my followers. The media didn't get it wrong on Lafayette Park. They lied to America, and they're still lying. It is so true. They're going to keep lying to us, too, until their ratings hit 0, which they're close. I mean, give them a week or two. But until, as long as they're on the air, as long as they're still working for Politico and for all these left-wing rags, they're going to keep lying to you. I have no doubt about it. Chris Bedford, thank you very much. Guys, when we get back, we'll take your calls on all of this, 844-500-4242. I do think I want to talk about the whale stuff a little bit. I mean, it's just the wackiest story I've ever heard. I was watching the guy talk about it, and I was just thinking, Mark Wahlberg is somewhere looking at his Twitter feed going, oh, I got my next movie. I'm putting this together. He's dusting off the Boston accent. He's getting ready to wow the crowds. And I'm curious if people, I don't want to say if you believe him, but I'm curious what people think about this. 844-500-4242. I've had my fair share of free lunches during my time at the Howie Carr Radio Network, so I can say this with confidence. Nothing beats Aviva Trattoria. I love Aviva. I'm actually going to an Aviva tomorrow. Very excited about that. Since the start of my show in January, Aviva Trattoria has catered a free lunch every other Friday here at the studio. And damn, they do an incredible job. I mean, the calamari, the sandwiches. Jared's a huge fan of the pizza.
Love the farmhouse pizza. Love the shrimp scampi pizza. They have a margarita pizza. There's a chicken pesto pizza. It is my go-to pizza. And don't sleep on the risotto either. The short rib risotto and the seafood risotto are phenomenal.
That's when we're feeling a little bit fancy. But I want to throw this in here. Jared's not just someone who just eats any pizza. Like the first time I met him, we had a whole conversation about, specific pizza styles, crust. He's picky. Okay. And it lives up to his standards. That's how good this pizza is. All their food there is delicious. They always bring all of our favorites, the homemade chips. I'm a big fan of that. If you love a nice salty chip, this is the place for you. And we have a new way we're doing this. Okay. Because we want everyone to get involved. We want everyone to use our text line 63566. Start your text with the word Curley, Curley, and then you're officially entered. Now, all you have to do is listen every Thursday for Trattoria Trivia. And that's when I throw out a question. You guys answer it. And it's a really easy way and fun way to win a free Aviva lunch. I'll be selecting a winner this Thursday. And the food is always great. It steals the show from me, which is totally fine because I love it too. They have convenient locations in Marlborough, Maynard, Wrentham, Westford, and their new location in Malden is opening Wednesday, June 16th, which I believe is this Wednesday. Takeout is available too. To enter to win the Aviva VIP lunch, tune into the Grace Curley Show every Thursday at 1 p.m. for Trattoria Trivia, but you should be tuning in at all times because you can't miss anything, including the whale's tail coming up next. We'll be right back. This is the Grace Curley Show.
You're listening to the Grace Curley Show.